Hello and welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Sean Lay. Brexit, not just an event, now a whole political movement. At the end of May, with its leader Nigel Farage at the helm, the Brexit party swept the board in the European Parliament elections, humiliating the UK's governing Conservative Party. 5 years ago, the same story. Triumph for Nigel Farage, albeit leading a party with a different name. Richard Tice back then was a Conservative. Now he's chairman of Mr Farage's party and one of its European MPs. With many experts predicting costly, bitter departure from the European Union, is the triumph of the Brexit party a humiliation for the United Kingdom and its politics? Richard Tice, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
The elections are out of the way, for now at least. Yes. Let's put the sloganeering to one side, if we may. People watch this programme all over the world, hundreds of thousands of miles from Europe, many who've never even been to Europe or to the United Kingdom. They don't necessarily understand the passion that Brexit has provoked. I mean, in your own case, personally, where does it come from, this conviction that the UK needs to get out of the European Union?
I've been deeply Eurosceptic for over 20 years, actually. I was very involved in the campaign not to join the euro, which would have been an absolute disaster
for this country.
The single currency of Europe, which the UK, quite rightly, stayed out of in the late 1990s. No, the conviction comes from the belief that we are a proud, sovereign, independent nation, and unfortunately, with the European Union, much of that sovereignty has been given away to Brussels.
Or shared, some would say, between the UK and the other members of the European Union.
Well, it's not shared if actually they make all the decisions and you basically have to take their decisions, their judgments, their rules, their regulations. That's not shared, you've given it away.
A lot of people say that's what the consequence of Brexit will be because of the nature of international trading arrangements. You'll actually end up with a position where instead of being around the table helping to shape the rules, sometimes losing, certainly, sometimes making concessions, it's called negotiation.
Correct.
You will be in a situation where you will be a victim, if you like, a powerless player outside the game.
Complete nonsense. Exactly the opposite. Yes, we'll be around the table, but we're in charge, we're in control, because it's our decision whether or not to enter into those deals. We will be back at the top table of the WTO, as opposed to a subservient slave of the European Union. So we can decide whether or not the terms of a trade deal are good enough, or whether we want to do a partial trade deal or no trade deal at all. It's our decision. That's what sovereignty is about.
I want to talk a bit about the World Trade Organization and trade deals and how they come about a little later, because it's a very important part of this. What should be last few months before we actually leave the European Union,
yes.
Who knows? Politics is a very uncertain business at the moment. You're a businessman, a very successful businessman in the property business for the last 30 years now. In a sense, you have thrived in the kind of economy that the UK has had, an economy that's operated as part of membership of the European Union. Again, I ask the question because it surprises a lot of people why you would want to put that at risk, because you would have to accept, would you, that any change poses risk, and a lot of business people thrive on risk, but it causes a lot of uncertainty for others.
Listen, I've been in business boardrooms for 30 years, right? There should be a sign in any well-run business on the wall of any boardroom that says uncertainty, because, you know, life is uncertainty. Business is uncertain because of all the technological change. So actually, you embrace that, you welcome it. But the truth is, you know, if we take back control, then we can make those decisions. And let's just remember, less than 10% of UK businesses export to the European Union. The business that I run at the moment is a UK-based business, but I've run a £1 billion multinational stock market listed company. I tripled the share price in 4 years, so I know how this sort of stuff
So you won't
works.
you won't be affected.
I won't be affected at all.
Great. But, so you can take the risk with everyone else's business.
But let's remember, that's 90% of the UK business community. Why should they be burdened with the rules and regulations determined in Brussels that affect their day-to-day lives? They shouldn't be. And let's remember, yes, of course, if you export to a different country, you abide by their rules and regulations. But why should our own domestic businesses that are only operating domestically, why should we suffer that increase in cost? We shouldn't.
There's been some concern that the Brexit Party is not being run in a very business-like way. I mean, in the property business, for example, you presume you know where your money comes from. You have to know where your money comes from. You don't in the Brexit Party.
That's complete nonsense.
Really?
Absolutely nonsense. In fact, the opposite is true. We are running it in an incredibly business-like way. We're like a fast-growing tech startup. That's why we've been able to achieve in the matter of 6 weeks what most political parties would achieve in a matter of years.
That doesn't answer my question about whether you know where the money comes from.
We are running it in an executive, fast-moving, fast decision-making capacity. We know where our money is coming from because we've got a series of processes in place, and the Electoral Commission have been in not once, but twice, within the space of 9 days, to check that out.
And in the middle of June, they said that you needed to get your act together. They said you need to change your online system for accepting payments to require donors provide their full address and contact details, while only accepting payments from a card with matching billing and pair addresses. Now, I'm not in business, but I do buy things using cards, and I know that if I don't provide that information, I can't buy most things.
There's a couple
Why
of
else
things,
should I be able to contribute to a political party?
There's a couple of things here. They made a specific recommendation that was fundamentally flawed. No, they made a very important one. They wanted us to lift the cap that we self-imposed of £500. Okay, which means that because anything below £500 is not a donation, it's a gift.
And therefore you don't have to
Therefore
be
you don't need
identified.
that. Those are the rules.
Don't you need to know who those people are?
We do know who these people are.
But how do you know it if you don't have the information?
Because they're registered supporters, they've signed up, they've paid their £25, we know who they are.
So you have their addresses, you have their names?
It's very important you listen.
No, hang on. No,
it's very important you listen. You've asked me, yes, and I'm answering it.
Do you know who these people are? Do you have their names and addresses?
Yes, we do, because they're registered supporters, they've signed up. The sort of information that has been spouted by various people, commentators, is nonsense, OK? And the Electoral Commission came in at 1 hour's notice because Gordon Brown wrote them a letter and politically interfered in the middle of an election.
I'm sure he'd be delighted to know he had so much influence.
Well, he would be, but that is disgraceful.
You don't think there were other reasons that they would have come forward?
We're delighted. We're very happy to accept recommendations. I'm a businessman. I believe in continuous improvement.
So why won't you accept the £500 recommendation, the one to lift this limit?
Because it does exactly the opposite of what they wanted. I actually think they've deliberately suggested it to make it more likely that we breach the rules. We impose that. I've already written to them and said that we are not going to take that recommendation because it's fundamentally flawed. We've put that cap in place, which means we are much less likely to breach regulation.
Let me put to you what the Commission said. In particular, the fundraising structure leaves the party have adopted, coupled with insufficient procedures, leaves it open to a high and ongoing risk of receiving and accepting impermissible donations and being unable to maintain accurate records of transactions. And the reason they single out this £500 question is very simple. You don't know, and we as members of the public don't know, whether somebody might, in order to preserve their anonymity, they might make a series of donations which are in excess of 500. It could be a lot more, and they could make them as a series of individual ones.
And
we have no way of knowing that.
And again, if you just ask me, right, we have a process to spot that.
You have a process, but you can't make it accountable to anyone else.
Yes, we can, and we showed the Electoral Commission. We have a process for checking that, and at the end of the day, let's remember, it's our responsibility. No one else's. It's our responsibility. We have a process. It's being carried out, and the suggestion to lift that cap is fundamentally flawed, and we have rejected it.
Let me ask you about the message of the party. You've described it as simple and clear. The message is essentially, is it not, that the establishment has betrayed the public and is in danger, is at risk of betraying Brexit?
Well, it's incredible, isn't it? It's 3 years and a day.
As we record this
programme. Since we voted to leave the European Union. And yet, we've not left. You know, we've been promised by all sorts of people, the Prime Minister over 100 times in the House of Commons, that we'd be leaving on the 29th of March. We haven't. It may or may not be the 31st of October. Our suspicion is that it won't be. You know, and we were promised, the people were promised that their vote counted, that Parliament was outsourcing this decision to the people and they would carry out this decision, and it was a once-in-a-generation decision. And yet, now, actually, they're trying to say, no, it's Parliament's decision. We're not going to leave without a no deal. Let's just remember, Parliament voted twice when it agreed to serve Article 50, with or without a deal.
This was the process by which
triggering the departure. Yeah. Then when it enacted the bill last summer, what's called the European Withdrawal Act, again, it voted to leave on the 29th of March with or without a deal. So why now have MPs suddenly bottled it wimped out and said, oh no, it's all a bit too scary. Why didn't they get ready? Why didn't they prepare so that actually we could leave on the 29th of March?
In the words of your leader writing back in April in a British newspaper, this arrogant elite have stuck two fingers up at their own manifestos, lied to the electorate and done everything possible to thwart the result. The sheer scale of their betrayal of the country is difficult to grasp. In the light of this, the best option open to Brexiteers is to punish both establishment parties, which is what happened in the European Parliament elections. But I just wonder this. Brexit, let's say Brexit happens, assuming it happens as you hope it will happen. At some point, there has to be some process of bringing the country back together again. If this rhetoric continues to be deployed, how is that going to increase the chances of that happening? Do you think?
Well, because we haven't left. The best way of bringing the country back together, and let's remember actually, the truth is, a country's always divided on politics. You've always got different parties with different views.
Have you ever known it as divided on an issue?
No, but this is a historically seismic moment.
Doesn't that create a responsibility on politicians to be very careful about the language they use?
And the responsibility is to abide by the will of the people, because that is the foundation of democracy. And the moment you breach that, then it's a very slippery slope. But yes, therefore, the sooner we leave, the sooner that the will of the people is carried out and that we can then run our own country, great. Then actually you start to bring us back together again. And I say to people, listen, if you want to have a review of the decision, 10, 15, 20 years down the track, fine. But you've got to leave first yet.
How long were you in the Conservative Party, or how long would you say you were a Conservative for?
I've only ever been a member of the Conservative Party. There were a few years when I left it because I had a disagreement with some of the policies of David Cameron, but otherwise I'd been a member for, a couple of decades or so. I believe in free markets. I believe in the role of the individual. So, yeah, I consider myself always a Conservative-minded type person.
Boris Johnson, the front-runner in the contest to succeed Theresa May as Conservative leader and therefore to become Prime Minister, says he too wants Brexit by the 31st of October. If he wins, you've got your way, haven't you? Won't it be time to go home?
Well, at the end of the day, let's see what happens, shall we? But, the clear message that we're getting is that people have lost confidence in the two main parties. And what's really changing now is that it's not a matter of being on the left or on the right. Actually, it's much more of a cultural thing. Are you a cautious, slightly managerial, risk-averse Remainer type? Or are you actually an ambitious, optimistic,
there you go again.
entrepreneurial, slight risk taker?
Can there not be people who want to stay in the UK who you would regard as good people?
Yes, it's a generalisation. But people generalise when you talk about left and right. I think things are changing. And now we say, actually, it's a matter of right and wrong. Who are the best people?
Right and wrong, again, you see, it's the language, isn't it?
It's just normal.
Them and us, it's
normal language.
You're either in our camp or you're not, it's tribal.
But it's
how is that going to bring people together again?
Look, as I say, politics, people always disagree on politics. That's the joy of it. You have a vote and you carry out that vote.
So is
and then you review it after a period of time.
Since there is, as we stand at the moment, who knows what events may result in, but he is likely to become British Prime Minister in a month's time. Is he in the right place or the wrong place at the moment?
Well, I think, to be honest, it's hard to know because he does flip-flop around. He did write all sorts of positive things, why the withdrawal agreement that Theresa May had negotiated was a terrible deal. He voted against it twice. He described it as a vassal state that we would become. And then he flip-flopped and voted for it. What sort of confidence and trust have you got in someone that is prepared to sell our country down the river at the third time of asking?
Are you, as a party, in any kind of discussions with the Conservatives or with Conservatives about the possibility of some kind of electoral arrangement?
Why would we? At the end of the day, we've just won by a landslide the last national election.
Well, as a Conservative, you might be frightened of a Labour government, so you might want to prevent that coming about.
I want to win. Give or take, we are topping the national polls. And we will be coming out this Sunday when we've got a huge rally for over 5,000 people. It's interesting to note Boris and Mr Hunt, a couple of days ago. Who's the other candidate. They could only get about 700 or 800. We've got a big rally, we're calling it the Big Vision Rally, and we'll be announcing our policies moving forwards, why we think actually there's so much more ambition, optimism that we can offer the country.
Let's talk about optimism. We'll leave the thought of what may or may not happen with the Conservatives. This is about the Brexit Party and your vision, really. In the event the UK leaves the European Union, having not secured a deal, there will be tariffs, extra costs that will make British goods more expensive for Europeans, at least, to buy. You accept that?
Only if we decide to impose them. Why would we?
because under the
It's our choice. You see, the great thing is it's our choice.
It isn't our choice, because you've said you want to be part of... You mentioned at the start of this interview the WTO rules, didn't you? And the WTO rules are very clear, aren't they, about what happens in the case of there not being an arrangement between the UK and the EU, as there wouldn't be, then the tariff rules have to be applied consistently. So we wouldn't, if we chose not to apply tariffs in the UK to people who are buying our goods, that would have to apply to every one of the other WTO members we're members.
But isn't that a great thing? Because where there are goods and things, agricultural products, that we don't grow, for example, of course we would want to reduce those. Why should we prop up Spanish orange growers when actually we can take them tariff-free from elsewhere in the world? These are the opportunities so we can actually reduce tariffs to zero or a much lower level that will reduce costs for our consumers.
It's a very seductive picture. There are two problems with that. Let's deal with the first one, for the European Union. When the European Union sits under the WTO rules, which you think are okay, or at least better, certainly, than the EU rules, the EU would be faced with the prospect of that unless it imposed tariffs on us, it would have to abandon all the tariffs it currently has applying to other countries. Now, therefore, on that basis, the logic will be that it will impose those tariffs, and we know what those tariffs would be. There is a list. They set it out fully, and it would be, a farmer would be facing 70% tariff imposed on beef. It was exporting beef from the UK, 45% on lamb, 10% on finished automotive vehicles. I mean, those are real practical things that would come in immediately. We left without a deal, assuming we did leave without a deal.
Well, the great thing is...
You accept that, don't you?
Look, if they decide to impose them, yes, but this is what negotiation's about. But the reality is we've negotiated a terrible deal.
What would be the negotiation? Because...
No, let's be very clear, right? This current government, they've tried and failed, right? So we're saying that our best negotiating position, bearing in mind that the European Union exports almost 100 billion more to us than we do to them, right? So actually they would suffer much more if tariffs were imposed. We've got the choice, okay, as to what tariffs we do or don't impose. And do you know what? Hey, yes, people might buy a few more cars that are produced in the UK for use in the UK. We might eat a bit more of the food that we produce in the UK. Things will change. Life changes. Life evolves. Do you know what? People will adapt.
What about people will adapt? That's fine. I accept that. And you've said yourself, your own business is not directly exposed. You've been very open about that. But what about those people whose their businesses depends on this trade, and they suddenly find that actually their goods have been priced out of competitiveness?
It's funny, isn't it?
They either absorb those costs, because the Swedish person buying the automotive part says, "Sorry, mate, I'm not a charity. I'm a hard-holding business like your good self. You need to sort the problem. You absorb the cost. You can't absorb the cost. You go under." I don't know many farmers who could absorb 45% or 70%.
People seem to forget that 3 years ago, actually, our exporters got a give or take 10 to 12% cut because of the movement in the exchange rate. So that increased their profits. They've had that for 3 years. What have they done with that? Okay, so actually, they've been better off for the last 3 years. They may have decided to invest that in the business or whatever.
Which the other thing is a good thing, presumably.
So I would say they've already had a serious leg up. The other great thing is that our government...
So it was jam yesterday and jam tomorrow. You'll just have to put up with a bit of plain bread today.
That's the nature of business. But our government can make its own decisions. We could, for example, give exporters a bit of help. You could reduce corporation tax. You could change things like capital allowances. You could change things on VAT. It's our choice. We're in control, and that's how it should be.
You accept, though, that none of this is automatic, that it will depend on a negotiation. And I wonder if you have appreciated how little time is left for that negotiation.
I'm well aware how little time is left. But the reality is, businesses have had over 3 years now to get ready. Look, I've been involved in business. You don't just have a plan A. You have plan B, C and D. And businesses should have been getting ready. And do you know what? Their only base case was? The only thing you could guarantee was a WTO deal. Right? So that's what all businesses should have been getting ready for. And the smartly run ones, that's what they've been doing. In the city, that's what they've been doing. And let me tell you about the City of London.
No, I'd rather you didn't. Okay. I'd rather you tell me about your policy and where you stand on this, because I wish we had longer, but we don't. Just on this question of the WTO rules, what I'm baffled by is the number of people, including people who are involved with Nigel Farage's party, who have said, look, there's no need to worry about this WTO rules business because we can get a deal. As you said, the European Union wouldn't be daft enough to impose tariffs, but you've also acknowledged that because of the pressure from other countries, it might end up doing just that. Then people have started saying, oh, well, that's all right, we can rely on Article 24. Article 24 means we won't have to do tariffs because there'll be a gentleman's or gentlewoman's agreement. And then they've discovered that actually Article 24 wouldn't apply in this situation. And I just find it surprising
and I've got to stop you there. I've got to stop you there because Article 24 can apply. I went over to Geneva to meet the... I went over in January to meet senior people from the WTO who said that actually, very clearly, Article 24 is a very suitable solution for this situation.
Who told you this?
A very senior person in the WTO, and I'll tell you what happens.
So why is everybody else saying
you've asked me a question, I've now got to answer it because it's absolutely critical. What happens is that the two sides get together and say, right, we don't want to have any tariffs, we don't want to have any quotas, so you reach what's called an interim arrangement whilst you basically spend 1 or 2 years dotting the I's and crossing the T's. That is available. Regrettably, our government have refused to consider it and not yet done it. That's why we asked the government to come in, to look at the no-deal preparations and to recommend this process. Then it's a straightforward matter of negotiating it between the two sides. And you've already got the political declaration. And senior people at the WTO confirmed to me it would be relatively easy to convert that political declaration, which already has been, it's like a heads of terms, into Article 24.
It would, but if that's what the European Union wants to do. But Michel Barnier has said that no future trade talks can begin, until agreement is reached on 3 key issues: citizens' rights. Well, that's probably relatively easy. The Irish border, well, that's pretty difficult. And then UK's financial obligations, that would also be very controversial. In those circumstances, it's no use to you talking about Article 24. It ain't going to happen. Let me put you what Peter Ungerhorn,
but you've fallen for the classic negotiating trap.
He's not an EU person. He says no deal means there's no agreement with the EU, and therefore GATT Article 24 doesn't apply. It applies where there is a potential agreement, where you have an outline agreement.
But the best way to get an agreement,
no outline agreement.
The best way to get an agreement is to at least ask for it. And our clueless, useless civil servants and feeble politicians have failed to ask for it, and it's a disgrace.
Sir Ivan Rogers was the UK's representative to the European Union. Let me at least put to you what he said,
no longer is.
And you can respond to it. He said, deliberately to walk out of the deepest internal market on the planet without a replacement, looser preferential deal in place is an act of economic lunacy. No deal is not a destination. It is simply a volatile and uncertain transitional state of purgatory in which you've forfeited all the leverage to the other side.
He's completely wrong, which is why, thankfully, he's not there. He has no idea about negotiation.
Is he wrong?
I'll tell you why he's wrong. Because he's believed the other side and he's not prepared to bat for Britain. And that's why that you need business people to come in and do these negotiations, because these civil servants have shown themselves to be totally and utterly out of depth.
If you do what has been suggested, let's say whether it's Boris Johnson or he might invite Nigel Farage and you to come along. Who knows? We live in interesting times.
We've offered, and 5 million people. 5.25 million people have voted for us to do that in the recent European election.
They voted for you to
but that was one of our 3 things.
You're right, it was one of your 3 things.
Thank you very much.
If we are abandoning tariffs, and you say there is a perfectly good positive economic case for doing that, where is our leverage in any future negotiation over a trade deal? Look, We've already opened ourselves up. Come on in.
No, I said it's our choice. So we can work out what we reduce, because that keeps some negotiating leverage. You know, we've got no leverage. If we don't grow oranges in this country, why do we want to put tariffs on oranges that are coming in? We do make cars in this country. It's not right, for example, that a 10% tariff is charged on US cars coming into the UK, and yet they only charge us 2.5%. It would be very easy to do a partial trade deal with the US on items like that.
Let me ask you finally, you've talked about the importance of risk and the value of risk. How much risk is acceptable in terms of economic disruption for this country? What would you be comfortable with?
I don't see it as a risk at all, because we've left it late.
There's none at all.
No, because we've got back control of our economy. We don't need to waste 39 billion quid of our money, hard-earned taxpayers' cash, sending it to Brussels when no one else pays for a trade deal. Canada didn't pay for a trade deal with Europe. Why should we? We don't owe them anything. The House of Lords report confirms we don't owe them anything. Our useless, weak civil servant negotiators have agreed it totally unnecessarily.
Richard Tice, Chairman of the Brexit Party. Thank you very much for being with us on Hard Talk.
Thanks.